Good morning. Happy Friday. We made it. Feels so good. Here on 104.5 The Zone, happy to have you guys in for today's show. Lucas Panzica's back there making it go. Coach Mack going to be here in, 18 minutes from now. Preseason, Football Friday. We got a game tomorrow at Nissan Stadium, and then the exhibition stuff is over. This sham of what we have been calling NFL football for the past couple of weeks just to kind of get us by. It's over. We can move on to games with actual meaning. It's also week 0. We got a little excited. Had Josh Pate in studio yesterday to talk about all the exciting college football action that's coming up. And there are some games this weekend, a couple, too, in particular, of local importance that we'll talk about today. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in at any point throughout the course of the next 3 hours. Good morning, bud.
Good morning. Happy football season.
Yes, happy football season to you and to all of those who celebrate. We have SEC stats of the day. We got 2 of them. We're skipping Tennessee. What happened in alphabetical order?
We are going to address Tennessee after they play football, which is in 6 days.
Oh,
so we're going to talk about Texas A&M and Vanderbilt, who, of course, plays tomorrow night.
Excellent. So there's a couple different news items, particularly in the NFL, and Dan Lust is going to be here at 11 o'clock to go through the Bills punter situation because that one has layers and the details are horrifying. But instead of opening up on a Friday morning with that, I thought I would go to the other kind of NFL nonsense that's happening right now. And we'll talk about preseason matchups to watch and Malik Wallace. You'll hear from Greg Cosell. There's a lot of good stuff on today's show. But what happened yesterday kind of took over the entire news cycle. It was even a major discussion basically through the entire. I watched the Prime Video broadcast. Do you have Amazon Prime? We talked about this yesterday.
I do have Amazon Prime. I did not watch any preseason football last night. Caught some highlights this morning.
All right, what were you doing that was more important than preseason football?
I don't know. High school football prep, watching something else. What do you care?
Why are you so defensive? What happened?
Oh, what are you doing? What, you weren't watching preseason football?
That's right. Listen.
No, I was not. No, I was not watching the Houston Texans threes against the 49ers.
Don't get mad at me. Davis Mills matters for the purposes of the next 6 months of our conversation. And so I'm going to watch every godforsaken Davis Mills snap that I possibly can at this point. Does it look like he got his neck shortened? His neck looks less long. I don't know that you obviously didn't watch the game last night, but this giraffe-necked meme that went around of Davis Mills when he got this starting quarterback job.
I think that was just a poor angle.
You think you like the Leonard Fournette stretching stuff?
Yes.
Where it looks like he's super thick, 2 C's. So you think but how does one get an angle of a longer neck? I've seen many different angles being taken in all kinds of pictures, especially for Instagram. Anytime you ask anybody to take a picture, they got to work it from 3 different angles, I guess, before it can meet significant other approval. Anyway. But with all the different stuff that was happening last night, I was watching the Amazon Prime broadcast, and for that, Kirk Herbstreit, Al Michaels, it felt like Sunday Night Football, and a big part of the discussion around it was the fight that took place between the Rams and the Bengals in their joint training camp practices. Not only that, we saw a situation where Aaron Donald is being tossed out of the middle of the scrum. But in his hands, he is holding 2 Bengals helmets. And it looks like, because the angle on this is difficult, and Aaron Donald is being accused of weaponizing helmets in the middle of the scrum, like straight up using them as weapons, dual wielding Bengals helmets with the intent to do harm. I have not seen. It's tough for me to tell whether that's actually him, even though he's clearly the player who's holding the helmets. I don't know that I'm comfortable saying that I can clearly and obviously see him swinging it, but I don't see anybody else holding a helmet like
It's Aaron Donald.
Okay.
He's wearing his number. He's double fisting helmets, and he is bringing them down with great force.
When you see stuff like this and the reaction afterwards, because the reaction's always funny to me, I saw a lot of different people freaking out about this stuff. And obviously it's horrific. But play the NFL Live clip because they had this. I guess they were reacting to it live in the middle of their show yesterday. Laura Rutledge and Adam Schefter, two of the people on the set. Laura Rutledge teased Adam Schefter up, and he describes it, I think, quite accurately.
Adam, what's going on out there?
Assault. Assault.
Assault on the practice field. Every time I see one of these things and people freak out about it, it's just like the football player is still doing football. Like what? How are you supposed to get the rage monster to differentiate between what's happening between the whistle, even though they are hugely disciplined for 90% of the time? These guys are insane.
Yeah, come on. What is that? Stop with that. How do you get the rage monster to know not to swing helmets at people's heads? What is that? What are you talking about?
They're football players.
So what?
They are inherently chemically imbalanced to me.
I understand that.
It's like I don't differentiate between what it is that they do for a living and what I saw Aaron Donald doing on the practice field. Like that to me, it's not that big a jump. It's not that big a jump. Why is everything on a football field not assault? Only because it's being played for sport. That entire sport is assault.
I mean, so I understand that tempers can run high and fights will happen. Like that is part of the game, but like there has to be a line somewhere where we stop just going, well, they're football players. What are you going to do?
Have you seen these guys in the heat of competition? Like, I feel like some of them black out in the middle of reps. I'm not excusing the behavior. It's just like, a football player did a football thing, but outside the whistle. Oh, no.
Is that how we talked about Myles Garrett after the Mason Rudolph thing? Oh, well, it's football.
Yeah, kind of.
No, not really. People were like, put him in jail.
Well,
like that. It was a very intense reaction.
Well, also there was and Ramon could probably speak to this better than I could. Wasn't there racial slurs involved in that?
Allegedly, yes.
With
Which is a different situation.
So a little different there, but also like everything that happens on a football field, every time I go to practice, every time I go to one of these games, it's assault. So, like, I'm not losing my mind because Aaron Donald's out there. Now, if he crushed somebody's skull, then it's different. Then it becomes a little bit, it's all serious. They're just all insane. I don't know why people get so bent out of shape about this. We'll talk to Coach Mack. Let's talk to Maxwell football with what we're going to see on the field on Saturday. Assault or not, a lot of different players who have things to prove to this coaching staff as they look to finalize the bottom of the roster and critical positions. Punter, backup quarterback, inside linebacker. We'll talk about it with Coach Mack next.
The Buck Rising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Visit springhillac.com.
That music makes you happy because you know it's time to talk ball with Titans Radio's head coach, Coach Dave McGinnis, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans, like an extra set of pads since 1947. They've been protecting Tennesseans. Coach Mack, all the great Titans Radio content produced by Farm Bureau Health Plans. What's happening, my guy?
Good morning, Buck. How we doing, man?
We are living, ready for this last preseason game to get into it and get through it, and then on to the regular season.
Yeah, here we go. So I'm looking forward to seeing you up there in the booth pregame, and then we'll jump right into this last preseason game, and then the tough decisions start for Tuesday.
Absolutely. Coverage, by the way, starting at 3 p.m. on Saturday with the Lee Company Countdown to Kickoff. Titans Countdown at 5. Mac, Mike, and the crew got you covered at 6 p.m. for kickoff between the Titans and the Cardinals. What's the most difficult decision on the roster for you right now, Mac?
Well, I mean, there's several. I mean, clearly he's been chumming John Robinson's been chumming the water, to find some veteran safety help. And you've got a pretty good backlog back there. Amadi just coming in brand new. He's had a limited exposure here, but they clearly like what they have seen. I remember vetting him, coming out, and of course being a local player here. But at Oregon, I mean, he was a very versatile player.
Right.
I think he can also fit into the slot. So you're going to look at that. I think that starting out when we started out this whole process, Buck. I think when I was on your show when we first started. The training camp process after they'd come out of the off season, they were going to give Dylan Radins, the first shot at this, just seeing what he was going to do coming off of his off season development. But, as it played out, Nicholas Petit-Frere, started closing that gap. And I think probably if you look at it realistically, they both have probably done about an equal job, with the run blocking that they've been given, both in practice and in the games. But the pass protection on the edge, I think right now is where Nicholas Petit-Frere, has an advantage right now. And so, look, just because you start out, somewhere doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up, because this, after all, is a meritocracy. And so when you're starting to look at what has got to come out, I mean, they've got a lot of defensive backs on this team. It's going to depend on where they are. I think that the interior defensive line, after about the first 3 or 4 is very interesting to me, to look at. And then you've got your numbers. I mean, you've got your punting situation, that you've got 2 very distinct, guys that are in the punting situation. One that very well, that's been very productive in a 15-year NFL career, and one that's got a huge leg, but is still brand new at it. So there's some decisions to be made. And there are some decisions that are going to be made, after everybody else's cuts too, Buck, because I don't expect them to cut right to 53. They'll probably cut to about 50. And then this group knows, especially the pro personnel department, how to scan the wire, because they did it last year with 91 players. So this is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Coach Dave McGinnis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. When you watch Malik back through these practices and these 2 preseason games, Mac, how does it look like he's seeing things on the field in front of him in these live reps?
Well, you and I both watched him. I mean, you're out there all the time, and we've both watched him since May. I mean, what he's done, you can see growth there. Now, there's still quite a ways to go, because the speed of what's happening to him, not only processing, before the ball is snapped, and I'm talking about all those pre-snap looks, which he has not seen a lot of varied pre-snap looks in the preseason, just because that's what defenses don't do in the preseason. But, and then being able to get that NFL clock in his head when he's in the cylinder, Buck, and throwing people open, not waiting until they're open to throw it, and then trying to fight the urge. Yeah, and you never want to take away his athleticism, but you've got to fight the urge to bail out and rabbit out of the back of that cylinder early. Because what happens when you come out of the back of the cylinder and then start spinning either right or left, and most of them spin to their right to their throwing hand. Well, you're cutting the field. Basically, you're just working a third of the field when you do that. And let's be honest too, Buck, so far and who he's been up against with these defensive people, when you start going against real dudes that we're going to have, coming up live when this season starts, they have all 3 levels that can walk a quarterback down. when he starts escaping, horizontally.
Right.
So that's why you need to be able to manipulate the cylinder is what how we talk about it, and then being able to escape. Where they're most dangerous is when they can escape that A or B gap once the cylinder has been formed, and they can manipulate that a little bit with their eyes downfield. And so he's still got all of that processing to learn. But I have seen growth. I think you have too. But it's going to be in increments that we're going to be experiencing this.
Yeah, he certainly had two good days of practice out there. Wednesday being the better one against the Arizona Cardinals for their 1 day of joint work. You mentioned the churn that they're working through the secondary right now, Mac. The difference between guys like Tyree Gillespie and Lonnie Johnson Jr. and now Hugo Amadi, who I know, as you mentioned, did play a lot of snaps. He didn't start a lot of games, but did play a lot of snaps in the slot for them in that defense. What are kind of the differences between those three players specifically that they kind of have to work with now?
Well, I think Amadi has got the most experience at the slot. And look, the reason that he's chumming the water for this position now and looking for some veteran presence back there is they're going to play a lot of altered defenses because they're going to play a lot of altered offenses. Once you start going, to 11 personnel or even 12 personnel where one of those tight ends is moved out like a wide receiver, and then like they're going to face, out here on Saturday, that the 10 personnel stuff, you've got to have safeties that can drop down and cover, and you also have to have, if you're playing that altered front, that nickel safety has also got to be able to read the open tackle on his side, be able to be part of that B gap run fill, when he's in there, and so Amadi has had the most experience at doing that. Both of these other guys, have been more back there in space. When you start to look at the difference, is what it takes. Things happen a lot quicker in that slot in a shorter area. Back there in the back, you've got more of a field of vision, and then you're back there in the back, you're reacting more to directional delivery keys, and you're reacting to splits and those types of things because you've got your bright lights on, for a full field of vision. So I think it really depends on what they want to settle on, with the type of person that they want there, and of course, Elijah Molden has got to figure into this. He just missed some practice time. So, I mean, that's what I think is going on is they're trying to find, one or two of those guys that have some veteran presence that once the season starts, everybody's nomenclature is a little bit different, but the schemes are basically, a lot of them are similar as to where if somebody has done it in this league, they can pick it up pretty quick.
Yeah, Coach Dave McGinnis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Mac, for the situation for the Titans and kind of what they're looking at in this game, guys at the inside linebacker spots have gotten a lot of snaps just because their depth has been a bit depleted. Dylan Cole missed some practice time. You've got Monty Rice, obviously, who's now on the reserve PUP, going to miss at least the first 4 games of the regular season. So guys like Chance Campbell and Jack Gibbons, Joe Jones, they've gotten a lot of opportunities. Those players at that position, what have they kind of shown to you?
Well, I mean, clearly they've shown that, they can operate, the defense, within who they've been playing against. But those guys, Buck, those guys are going to have to be core teamers, at the start of it. Right. Because you're going to be in a lot of defenses this season. And the National Football League is to where really you have sometimes, percentage of times that you're going to have just one linebacker back there, and that's where these other safeties come into play. So the 3 guys that you just mentioned, they are going to have to be able to make the team. I coached linebackers for a lot of years in this league, and those guys that were always backups for me were guys that I knew that I could put into and finish a game with, but they also had to have a very, very good concept of what was going on. And then whenever, depending on the skill sets, whenever you put one of those guys in a real ball game, then as a defensive caller, you can do things around their skill set as to where you're not putting them in some real, unusual situations where they're going to be exposed to some things that they can't do as well as the starters can. So, but those guys that you just mentioned, they are going to have to continue to shine on special teams because that's the quickest way for this roster, in my opinion.
Without Danico Autry on the field, Mac, you're not worried about him. He's going to be able to come in. He's a veteran. He's played a lot of football. It's just about making sure he's physically right. But in his absence, Demarcus Walker and a lot of these other guys, these younger guys who they've kind of been trying to work their way through as to who's going to differentiate themselves. Demarcus Walker has really been a bright spot, it would seem to me, both in practices and in preseason games, and he's getting a lot of reps right now.
Yeah, well, and these guys have gotten a lot of reps, and I think, again, you ask about positions. I think, as I said, the guys behind those, the main three or the main four up there on that interior, there's some positions still up for grabs there, and that's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, I think Larrell Murchison is one of those guys, that's going to have to continue to step up. Hand has stepped up. So the things that you're looking at right now, Buck, these last roster spots at those types of positions, you're evaluated, a lot during your practice time too, because that's the reps that you can control. Now, once you get into a ball game, say we get into this ball game tomorrow night, and Arizona, just wants to spin it, every time. I mean, that's their prerogative to spin it every time. So a lot of those things you would see from those three techniques and those shades, I mean, that's not, really their game,
right?
As to what goes on. So you can't control what goes on in a preseason game, but their evaluations, I think, they've been looking at it very, very closely for about 4 of those guys in there during the practice session. This is going to be an interesting move because there's going to be probably somebody that's going to not make the original roster that, when exposed, will probably get a chance somewhere else.
Coach Dave McGinnis making us smarter about what we're going to see tomorrow night. Of course, Mac and Mike Keith on the call. Titans Radio kickoff at 6 p.m. right here on 104.5 The Zone and across the Titans Radio Network. Mac, I saw this fight break out between the Rams and the Bengals, and every head coach worst nightmare with these joint training camp practices, anything that would cause guys to incur injury where they might not otherwise have to. What was the policy for Dave McGinnis as a head coach when it came to fighting on the practice field?
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it either with somebody else or with yourself, because look, I lost Kyle Vandenbosch 1 year at training camp, with Kyle Vandenbosch and then Big Leonard Davis got in a fight. If you know who Big Leonard Davis is, that he was a number 1 pick out of Texas, that's a large human being.
Yeah.
They got in a fight up there at Flagstaff, and I had a broken hand out of it. So now I've got a guy playing, with a Q-tip on his hand, for the first 4 weeks of the season. There's just nothing good that comes out of it. But something I will say, because I've been around him since he started in this league, if you're going to fight somebody, leave Aaron Donald out of that group you want to fight.
He looked like he was ready to go. Coach Dave McGinnis, Titans Radio. Mac, I'll see you in the booth. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll look forward to all the great coverage that will come from Nissan Stadium.
Thank you, Buck. Look forward to seeing you up there on Saturday.
That's Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio. Saturday, Titans and Cards. Tommy Shelby, have any thoughts on the fighting policy when it comes to training camp?
Despite the provocation from the cavalry, no fighting. Oi! No fighting. No fighting. No fighting. No fighting! Good.
Even without the visual, the fight that breaks out afterwards always makes me laugh. 615-737-1045. What are you most looking forward to seeing tomorrow night at Nissan Stadium? We had some good submissions yesterday. But the safety depth and the point that Mac made about Elijah Molden, his health is something that is going to continue to be a storyline, I think, throughout the early going of the season and how they kind of supplement that. I don't know what his readiness is going to be. We're still basically 3 weeks away at this point before these guys play a football game. But Buster Screen, this is the kind of stuff that has impact and takes a toll when you have a guy who's 33 years old. He's clearly the most senior player in that room, and he makes it to the, I think, report day, right, of training camp. Didn't he retire on report day? Or maybe he told them when everybody reported, and they were just like, all right. Well,
that's when Vrabel told us. We found out on report day.
Okay, so we don't know exactly when Buster Screen retired, but we found out about it when everybody came back to training camp. And, for Buster Screen, played some really good football for the Titans last year in a couple of different spots. You could rely on him to be versatile. That's not necessarily something that you can have as a given. Chris Jackson is one of those guys who was just basically positioned as a defensive back coming out of Marshall. when he did in 2020. And he's played some good snaps for them, but he's got a knee thing that he's dealing with right now. I don't know how reliable Chris Jackson is at this particular moment when the sample size that we've seen of him so far, both in practice and in preseason, not ideal. Now, your fifth corner is rarely going to be ideal. Like there's been guys like this since the beginning of time in football where everybody has a corner. Everybody has a corner on their favorite football team, college or pro, who you associate with, oh, not that guy again. And I'm not saying that Chris Jackson is that guy because I think he was the MVP of the Rams game on Sunday Night Football. He's incredible. But what they're looking for is somebody who has played enough football that will not put them in a position of being compromised should there be a missed assignment that a younger player might make, or a guy who's not played as much or is in as many different positions as some of these dudes that they're trying to bring in. And Hugo Amadi is the latest of these. Brandon, rushing on the Zone TV chat, YouTube specifically, Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. That's where you can interact. He says, WTF is Molden's injury. That was in the bubble. Rhett Bryan saw him get banged up at some point before the only bubble practice that they had during camp, which I think was at like the last day of July or something like this. And it looked like it was on his left, something to do with his left leg. Because what I saw, and I think Austin Stanley at A to Z Sports had the video, they were doing this like fumble recovery drill in the bubble indoors. And apparently Molden had done something the day before, but he was out of practice the next day. I believe this was a Friday. And you see him go down to recover the ball as it's bouncing around, and he comes up kind of limping on his left side. We didn't see him for 2 weeks after that. So I have no answers beyond what we've seen and the light work that he's got in practice. And Lucas, in fact, if you could find it, it may be from a couple of days ago, but I talked to Elijah Molden at practice. It's on my Twitter timeline. Maybe we can find it at some point. But I mean, basically in that, he was telling me that he was still playing. He was still practicing through some stuff. And as evidenced by the last 2 days of practice that he's missed, it's clearly still something that's lingering. So with Lonnie Johnson Jr., who's been active, was certainly active in the game itself, Adrian Colbert, who they've brought in recently, it's probably going to continue to look like that. And a point that Mac also made that I want people to kind of cue in on when it comes to next Tuesday and roster cut days. Because largely going into tomorrow, they know who's going to be on the roster. They may have one handful of decisions that they're actually going to make after the game wraps up. But for the most part, they know what they've got, and they know who's going to be able to give them the most value in as many different places as a 53-man roster needs. Practice squad on top of that. Something to keep an eye on is how far down below 53 they go once they make the Tuesday cuts, when they have to go from 80 to 53. Because Mac, it seems, is thinking the way that we all are about the idea that, yeah, they're probably going to want to keep an eye on what's out there, what other teams are casting out, and how many spots below 53 they end up going. Positions like wide receiver, interior offensive line, maybe tackle, inside linebacker. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about. But this was Elijah Molden 2 weeks ago talking about practicing through some stuff. And since then, he's missed additional time.
Mate, I know you've been working inside, but
yeah,
as far as kind of getting back out here on the field's concerned.
Really, I think I missed 2 weeks. And 2 weeks in training camp feels like 2 months. Like the days go by so slow. But it's good to be back out here. Obviously, kind of working through, my technique and fundamentals and what my body allows me to do. And then also going through some regular type of pain and really just working through it.
Seemed like you were able to do more today than you did yesterday based on how much time you spent out here on the field. Was there a noticeable difference for you?
Yeah, I think it's just the progression that, I've talked to Graves about, kind of working me back in and letting my body adjust.
What's your patience level working through that? I know You want to be back out there, but there's still a ways to go for the season. You still got time.
Yeah.
Do you allow yourself to be patient, or how does that work?
I mean, yeah, but I think like if I can be out there, then I'm gonna be out there. I think even last year, my whole mindset was like, as long as I can help the team, I'm gonna be out there. So if that means kind of going through some stuff, working through it, then that's what that means.
So that's Elijah Molden talking about working through some stuff right now. I mean, again, granted, 2 weeks ago, but still, whatever it is continues to linger at this point. We will get back to the Titan stuff later on. Greg Cosell gave some great analysis of Malik Wallace and Caleb Farley specifically that I'm going to want you to hear. And it's, are we going to do a 53-man roster on the air?
I mean, I think we can project, but Monday, I believe, is where that conversation is most relevant.
Oh, wait, so you want to kind of tease it today, do the preseason game, and then do it on air on Friday?
I think you can have a conversation about how many to keep at every respective position today, and that could sort of set up a more specific conversation on Monday when we have, obviously, the entire sample size that the Titans will have at their disposal.
I'm trying to think of how to do a 53-man roster in ways that are convenient, because I'll just have somebody go back and transcribe this afterwards, and then I'll put it as a post, and we'll call it a day. Yeah. Content,
right?
Because I saw Mike Herndon put out a 13-tweet thread of his 53-man roster, and all it made me think of. And listen, Mike's a great follow on Twitter for exactly these kind of reasons. But what did Josh Pate say yesterday? We're not getting paid to put anything on Twitter, baby. So we'll do a 53-man roster at some point before roster cut day comes down. Meanwhile, we got the first of 2 SEC stats of the day that we're going to do. We've done 2 in the last couple of Fridays, getting you closer to the college football season, and it is officially here. Texas A&M is up next. We'll do that. I'm Buck Rising, 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back. Buck Rising here with you until 1 o'clock today. 615-737-1045. Jump in if you want. Got the first of two SEC stats of the day. Week 0 coming up. Vanderbilt plays football tomorrow. Hawaii. I saw Kevin Ingram post his picture that they touched down, and it looked just the picture from the plane. It looks so much nicer at the Hawaii airport than it does at any other airport in the country. Is that put it on the poll. Is the Hawaii airport the happiest airport in the world? Because I would venture a guess to say it is. Do you know anybody that lives on Hawaii or like on one of the islands?
Nope.
I had a friend who lived here when we moved out of college, moved to Hawaii, didn't know anybody, and is like just completely, she just island hops. It seems like an incredibly cool way to exist, but also I don't know how I would do that far removed from everything else on like mainland USA. You know
you couldn't do it. No way.
I couldn't do it?
You can't even vacation for like 3 days. You can't. How is your life going to be a vacation?
I didn't make it for 2 days. I made it for a day and a half.
Yeah, so good luck living in Hawaii, living in a vacation.
It really is a problem. Like, that's something that has to come up in therapy. Anyway, a conversation for another day. With week 0 coming up and the SEC West being a big talking point, we're going to focus specifically on Tennessee after they play, like Lucas said earlier in the show. Let's first start with Texas A&M. What is the Texas A&M stat of the day?
So the stat of the day for the Aggies is the number 1. That is the amount of seasons under Jimbo Fisher where Texas A&M has finished with less than 4 losses. And it was a 9-1 campaign in 2020, the COVID year. Every other year of the Jimbo Fisher era at College Station, they have had at least 4 losses on the schedule. So Jimbo Fisher through 4 years, 34-14. Kevin Sumlin's first 4 years in College Station, he was 36-16. Just throwing that out there. It's not to say Jimbo's on the hot seat because that's not even remotely close to true. It's not remotely close to true.
I don't know.
But if you looked at Josh Pate when he was in here yesterday and said, hey, Jimbo Fisher, he's on the hot seat, I think he would reach over to your mic and slap you in the face. Jimbo Fisher's not on the hot seat. But if that trend continues this season.
Don't project onto Pate what you want to do to me yourself, all right?
I think we will be talking about Jimbo Fisher in a different light heading into 2023. So this team still needs to determine who their starting quarterback is between Haynes King and LSU transfer Max Johnson. And they're going to need to rely on some freshmen from that monster recruiting class, especially on defense. They just need to beat the teams that they're supposed to beat and figure out their quarterback of the future this year. Like, I feel like the goals are twofold for Texas A&M. Beat who you're supposed to beat, meaning Mississippi State, who you lost to last year. Miami's probably in there. It'll be week 3 of the Mario Cristobal era in Miami. That game's in College Station. You have got to win that game. And that includes Florida as well in year 1 of Billy Napier. So if that happens, A&M should be a 9-win football team, and they should have an idea of what the future looks like at the quarterback position. But there's a lot of questions there. There's a lot of exciting players in College Station. Devin A-Chain, nobody's really talking about. Running back, kick returner, going to be really explosive, fun to watch. But those are the 2 things for me for A&M.
You know what 2 words I most associate with Texas A&M in the last couple of years?
What's that?
Wasted opportunity is something that kind of comes to mind for me because he's 5 years into this. Jimbo is at A&M. They haven't won a national championship. As Lucas mentioned, they have lost 4 games in all but 1 season so far. They had the victory of the college football season last year, and then they just kind of petered out. Now, maybe it's special just for the upset because I don't think anybody looked at A&M at the time, unranked, facing Alabama the way that they did, and it came down to a last-minute kick, all these different things. Like, it takes a lot of luck outside of just skill to do what A&M did in that day. But at what point, I guess my biggest question around them, and I don't know if you can answer this, I don't know if the audience can answer this, I don't know if any of our smart friends in college football can answer this. Perhaps Pate could have yesterday, but I didn't think to ask him. At what point do I start to see all of this incredible recruiting that Jimbo Fisher has been doing translate onto the field? Because am I unfair in my assessment of saying that I haven't seen that in a concrete way just yet? Like, it's not like A&M's not still producing pro players, but again, it comes back to the conversation about what they are as a college roster and how much they're able to push the other cream of the crop in the SEC, especially the SEC West. Because it's really just, it's them and Bama, right? That's who we're talking about?
In the West?
Arkansas?
No, yeah, we're talking about Arkansas. Oh, yeah. That Arkansas, we talked about this a little bit during media days. Like, I don't know right now, and it's okay for me not to know, but I don't know what their identity is right now, A&M. I don't know who their starting quarterback is right now. Haynes King and Max Johnson are different players. I have no idea what their identity is going to be. I know exactly what Arkansas is going to look like in 2022. That doesn't mean Arkansas is a surefire, better football team than Texas A&M. They're not more talented, but I know what they are. I know who their quarterback is. I know who he's going to be throwing to. I know their defense is going to be good and that they're going to be well coached and that there is a fantastic culture being built in Fayetteville. I know some of those things with A&M, but I don't know all of them like I do with Arkansas. So that's where if I'm going to sit here and have to predict the number 2 finisher in the SEC West right now, it's going to be based on what I know, not what I think might happen. So I'm going with Arkansas. But it's going to be interesting. They got to beat Miami. That Arkansas game is going to be massive early on. A&M lost that game in Jerry World last year. They lost to both Mississippi teams last year. That can't happen. So I have no idea what to expect from Texas A&M this year. I know they're going to be a good football team, a 9-10 win caliber team, but can they stay healthy, which they did not last year? That's a factor that we kind of forget when we talk about a disappointing 8-4 finish. Like, they kind of had a little bit of a revolving door of quarterbacks. Zach Calzada was not supposed to be the starter against Alabama, even though he led them to the win, had the game of his life in that game. Haynes King went down. They had a bunch of other injuries as well. So they are one of the more interesting case studies in the SEC right now. There's no doubt.
That was one of the biggest questions that I had coming out of the preseason, the AP preseason top 25 poll, is why there was such a gulf between A&M and Arkansas at 6 for A&M and 19 for Arkansas. Because then it's like they forgot that they had 3 other SEC teams that they had to plug in here. So they went bam, 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 1, 2, 3, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Ole Miss. 19, 20, 21. So looking at what they have on their schedule, A&M specifically, they open with Sam Houston State.
Speaking of, was it Sam Houston State that Rich Rod accused of cheating?
Recently?
No, or maybe it wasn't Sam Houston State. Oh, shoot. I DM'd you this.
What happened?
Rich Rodriguez, he's now the head coach at...
No, I know who Rich Rod is.
Yeah, he did. Well, he's now at Jacksonville State, and he accused, maybe it's Jack State's week 1 opener. He accused them of spying on them at practice.
I'm sorry, what?
It's Stephen F. Austin, another one of those Texas schools. So apologies to Sam Houston State. But yes, Rich Rod has accused Stephen F. Austin of cheating. You can probably find that audio.
Wait, the last DM. Oh no, I see the string of DMs that I missed from you, because the last one that I saw was the one from Robert about the Sea Lion that picked Georgia Tech over Clemson, and all the DM says is that Sea Lion is an effing idiot, except not effing. But no, I missed your Rich Rod's allegations of cheating. The tweet says East Texas espionage, which is just exactly what you need to start week 0. Let me hear from Rich Rod.
Pretty good source was true that they had a couple staff members at our spring game, which is kind of like that's not really supposed to happen. But no, we're making plans accordingly. If they're over there thinking they have our plays or what have you, or signals or something like that, we've changed things since the spring. Then we caught somebody trying to film something the other day. And first, my daughter caught him, Raquel saw him, and then we caught him again, saw him, peering through there with his camera. And I sent the biggest guy in our program, crew, one of our assistant strength coaches. He's about like 6'7", 350, probably benches like 1,000 pounds or something. Sent him up to bleachers to run him out, and that guy disappeared pretty quick.
So Stephen F. Austin, Jacksonville State might have just shot to the top of my list of week 0 games to watch tomorrow.
What in the paranoia is he talking about?
Hey, I don't know if there's a guy with a camera at practice. He has to address it, right? I mean, he's a college football coach. Any other coach would have had a similar response.
I want this to be true so badly.
That Stephen F. Austin is out here spying on Jacksonville State.
It would be. I would immediately become a Stephen F. Austin fan. I would abandon any other previous college football. I feel like because I bandwagoned Arkansas last year. I feel like I've picked a different college football team to bandwagon because I don't really have any actual ties to any one university, probably more Notre Dame than anything. But that's boring after a while. I will immediately buy all of the Stephen F. Austin merch that there is and wear it for an entire college football season if they are actually cheating to try and beat Jackson State.
FCS drama. I love it.
All right, we'll do another SEC stat of the day. The team that plays this weekend, tomorrow, as a matter of fact, Vandy, is at Hawaii to open their season, and we'll take a closer look at them in the last part of the second hour. But coming up next, a incredibly serious story that has got a lot of tentacles that are starting to be fleshed out with what's going on with the Buffalo Bills and the guy who you guys asked me about on Wednesday at training camp practice. We just talked about Matt Araiza. What'd you call him? Oh, you got a mouthful of, what are you eating back there? Now I'm going to put you on the microphone. While
Chicken minis.
Oh, we're in the middle of a segment. Why are you stuffing your face?
We're at the end of a segment, in my defense.
We'll talk about this very, very serious situation with the show's legal counsel, Dan Lust, next.
It is 11:01. Good morning from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Tennessee Titans wrap up the 2022 preseason Saturday night at Nissan Stadium against the Arizona Cardinals. The Lee Company countdown to kickoff hits the air at 3. Titans countdown starts at 5, and kickoff with Mike Keith, Coach Mack, and the rest of the Titans radio crew is at 6 p.m. Nolensville Baseball defeated Texas 7-1, advancing to the U.S. Championship in the Little League World Series on Thursday. They will take on Hawaii for the U.S. title, who they lost to earlier in the week. That game will happen tomorrow at 2:30 in the afternoon. College football is back. Week 0 starts Saturday morning with Austin Peay in Western Kentucky at 11 a.m., Northwestern and Nebraska facing off in Dublin at 11:30, and then Vanderbilt kicks off year 2 of the Clark Lee era at Hawaii tomorrow night. A 9:30 kickoff. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Second hour on this Friday. Welcome in to 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back. If you've been hanging out with us so far, hope you're having a great Friday. Jump in if you like. 615-737-1045. We'll have time to talk about the Titans and the Cardinals preseason game number 2 coming up tomorrow at Nissan Stadium a little later on in the show. There is a significant situation, though, in the NFL, and anytime there is legalese around it and things that we may not necessarily understand because of our lack of legal training, we like to call Dan Lust at Sports Law Lust, the Conduct Detrimental podcast, who makes all of these things smarter, these conversations that we have every time it comes on. I'm sorry that we call you every time there's something like this with such horrific details in it, Dan, but I'm happy that you're here.
The truth is, if you called anyone else, I would be very offended. So certainly happy to help.
Okay. Well, at this point, then we must at least keep up appearances. For the situation that came out yesterday, reported by the Los Angeles Times, the Bills rookie Matt Araiza and 2 others have been accused of gang raping a 17-year-old girl last year in a lawsuit filed in San Diego County Superior Court. The details on it are, of course, horrendous. All 3 are accused of rape, gender violence, and false imprisonment. Dan, I've not seen those last 2 charges or accusations, rather. I'm not familiar with what gender violence and false imprisonment mean. Could you kind of clarify for me in the audience?
Yeah, of course. And I guess we should say as an initial note, right, these stories are never fun. Usually when lawyers are involved, it's something messy, but there's always time for an education and to explain what's happening. Especially, the Bills, right? This is a high-level draft pick and a guy that was supposed to be a very big part of the Bills. I think they're the Super Bowl favorite, so certainly a story worth following on that front. So here's the deal. We'll separate a couple things. So Buck, you mentioned the word charges. As of right now, there are no criminal charges. We have a civil complaint.
Okay.
Without getting into the messiness of the allegations, you mentioned it, right? It's a group accusation involving one female victim. When you say something like false imprisonment, you can use your imagination as to what that is, but someone trying to leave a situation and not being allowed to, whether that's by physical force or just the person makes a request to leave or indicates that they want to leave and they're not able to leave. So, and violence obviously speaks for itself. People can read, the LA Times had the initial story on here. It's some really messy allegations that I don't think are meant for radio.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's certainly what we're dealing with. It's a civil case. It is not a criminal case as of today. And then the question is, right, what the Bills knew, when they knew it, and what they're going to do as a result of it.
The attorney who filed the lawsuit told ESPN that the Bills were made aware of the allegations as recently as the end of July. That's been about a month when the attorney says that he emailed the team's representation. They have been, and I know this goes a little beyond the legal, other than just, general grossness and ethical concerns. They've been propping this guy up as a franchise. Like, he's been a part of their marketing throughout the course of the preseason. Araiza has. A statement from the Bills yesterday. Were recently made aware of a civil complaint involving Matt from October 2021. Due to the serious nature of the complaint, we conducted a thorough examination of this matter. As this is an ongoing civil case, we will have no other comment at this point. I don't know how you can, in good conscience, put together a statement that says we conducted a thorough examination of this matter and then continue to, hold this guy up, Dan.
Well, the other thing which I think should be mentioned, there was a camp battle, which I know you guys were just at camp with the Titans.
Yeah.
Right. There was another punter in the Bills roster, another Matt Hawk, and the Bills, and this is part of the narrative, the two attorneys are kind of sniping at one another in the media. The defense attorney for Matt Araiza is saying, well, how convenient. You just filed this lawsuit after Araiza made the team, right? It seems calculated in that sense, according to that attorney. And the attorney for the victim is saying, well, this was made known to the Bills long before this, long before this particular date. But, as sometimes happens in litigation, they put a date, say, hey, if you're not going to resolve this case by X date, we are going to follow through with the lawsuit. So that's why, if you want to believe the attorneys, that's why the Bills say recently, right? They're not actually saying what particular day, right? So it seems to have been some narrative before the lawsuit was actually filed. And at least according to some reports, some exchange of settlement numbers. Not to say that Araiza's side offered anything, but it seems like the plaintiff side put a monetary demand on the table, which was not met.
Araiza's side of things, Kerry Armstrong, his representation, called the accusation false and told the LA Times that his investigator spoke to witnesses from the party who contradict what is stated in the lawsuit. When they go about sniping at each other in the media this way, I know it's specific to individual cases and not all, very few of these situations are created equal, but it seems so rarely that those things are net positive, but I feel like I see it happen in almost every case in the sports world that we end up discussing these things, Dan.
It's kind of tit for tat. The first one that's going to do it is certainly going to be the plaintiff side, the one bringing the accusation, because they want to put as much attention on the case as possible. And, people can say that maybe that's an attempt to get more money from the other side. And, at the end of the day, that's why one files a civil case. They're seeking monetary damages. That's the definition of a civil case. The second that you kind of go over that line and make that case public, then it's a question on the other side of whether you want to do damage control and see how publicly you want to respond to it. Just a quick, story. I think, Buck, you and your listeners will appreciate it. There's something in law called the Streisand Effect. Are you familiar with that term?
I'm not.
2003, about 20 years ago, Barbara Streisand sued a photographer for taking photographs of her, house on the beach, right? And this guy put it on his private website. There were 8 people, literally 8, that saw that picture on this photographer's random website. Barbara Streisand filed a very, very public lawsuit alleging that this photographer invaded her privacy. How dare you show people where my house is? Now everyone's going to know where I live. But here's the thing. Exponentially more people knew of where her house was from that lawsuit, right? So she brought a lot of attention to the case. That's why we call it the Streisand Effect. So by, certainly here, we're talking about the defense side. Do you bring more attention to the case by doing, as this, the defense attorney for Araiza is now, making public statements, going on television, and saying Matt didn't do anything? That's the question here. It's the same question we had in the Deshaun Watson case when those attorneys were going back and forth. Was the defense side bringing more attention to the case? It's always a calculus you have to bring. And then maybe, right, you say the wrong thing, without getting into too much detail. If there is a criminal case here, it's a different one than we have with Watson, right? This is an allegation from a 17-year-old victim. And in the state of California, right, this could be akin in criminal law to something called statutory rape, which doesn't really matter, right? If Araiza knew that this individual was a minor, it's just kind of by definition. So according to the LA Times, there's a recorded conversation between Araiza and the police where Araiza admits to some type of acts occurring. And it's just a matter of whether that rose to the definition of statutory rape. So this isn't something where the attorney can get on the stand and say, hey, this did or didn't happen. If Araiza has admitted to it, it's a very, very different case. So that's at least what's being reported, and why this is maybe a more serious, a more likely criminal case than you had on the Watson side, because there was no admissions or anything like that from Watson.
At Sports Law Lust, Conduct Detrimental, the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. Thank you as always. I know it's short notice, but we appreciate you stopping by, because anytime we kind of wade into these waters, we want to make sure that we have somebody smart to kind of walk us through it.
Yeah, and it's certainly a serious case, so it's got to be dealt with very appropriately. But obviously, we'll stay tuned, and always a pleasure. That's
Dan Lust with us on 104.5 The Zone. I'm glad. Oh.
That startle you?
I was just getting ready to say. So we talked about this the last. Okay, let me first collect myself, because the details on this, honestly, this is a horrifying story.
Terrific.
And so I don't want to make light of the story. The details of the alleged acts that were done to this 17-year-old girl, they made me nauseous this morning when I was reading through the reporting from the Los Angeles Times. So I don't make light of the story itself, but we had talked the last time that Dan Lust was on the radio show about doing a bunch of hokey Law and Order production around him. And I'm glad that you got the message while I was saying, please
pick and choose.
Please do not put the Law and Order music behind me while I'm asking about this story to Dan Lust.
We'll be selective on the imaging for those segments.
So selective was to scare me with the Law and Order gavel after he was off the phone?
Every time he signs off, I think it's appropriate to throw in the gavel. But on a serious note,
the judgment of this show is just so poor collectively.
From an organizational standpoint, look, Bills have to let him go, right? And you can throw, innocent until proven guilty. Like, no, it is a franchise. It's a business. You have to let him go.
They already made the decision. They cut the other guy and kept this dude.
And the Colts signed him, Matt Hawk, who is an accomplished punter in this league. He's 28 years old, veteran punter that they let go to keep Araiza.
I struggle so much with this, because it's just such a rinse-repeat cycle of expecting football programs or franchises or leagues or just anything in professional sports to do the thing that is not, that may go beyond the best interest of the team, but is clearly a horrifying situation, other than, can you help us capitalize on field position? Much like the marketing part of it is what makes me so, it's not the only thing that makes me sick to my stomach about this. The details of the story are what make me sick to my stomach about this. But I don't know why it's been so hard for me, because I'm perpetually skeptical of these guys, not the players, but of organizations when it comes to doing the right thing. Just generally doing the right thing. When Roger Goodell got in front of a bunch of media people at the owners' meetings to approve the new Broncos ownership, and he said of appealing the Watson situation, we're just doing it to do the right thing. I'm sorry, I don't believe anybody in professional sports who gives me that line, because the behavior consistently works to the opposite effect.
But it's easier for Roger Goodell to say that, because it is the right thing, and it would be better business for the NFL to have Deshaun Watson playing more games, right? Like, as crude as that is to say, it's true. So, but the PR of doing the right thing and going from 6 games to 11 is beneficial for the league. Here's a very easy marketing decision for the Buffalo Bills.
Get him out of there.
Cut the punter on a rookie deal. He's not the franchise quarterback you've given $230 million guaranteed to. He's a punter. He's a really good punter, but he's a punter on a rookie deal. Versus what you have to face if you keep the guy that has these allegations pinned on him right now. And innocent until proven guilty doesn't matter in the eyes of the Buffalo Bills. Like, perception. It matters. Cut the punter on the rookie deal.
Does it, though? But here's the part that makes me sad about all of this. You just made a great case for, outside of the obvious, why they should do this, because it's in their best interest now to do it as well. Did you see the signs? The things being posted on social media, the signs from the Deshaun Watson stuff?
Like Browns fans.
It's only you could definitely hone it down to a very, very small, sick and twisted collection of individuals that was comfortable putting on signs, a father and his small son, F these hoes, free Watson. That was a sign that was held up at a Bills game. Now, I know that is the worst of the examples, okay? I'm not saying that there is a large contingent. I'm not trying to unfairly expound behavior onto a bigger group than might actually be behaving that way. But you tell me that optics matter in football, and I keep seeing time after time again a general lack of care or a short attention span around this stuff to where it's just, okay, who's the next opponent and who's next on my depth chart? It kills me for the victims of these things. Alleged still at this point with Matt Araiza, but, I mean, come on.
It seems like such an easy decision for me from an organizational standpoint. Cut the punter on a rookie deal. Then, yeah, you got to go get another punter. There's other punters out there. In fact, there's one in Nashville that's from Buffalo.
All right, don't try to turn this into a Titans position battle talk. Get out of here.
I know.
Get out of here.
I'm
what are
just
you
saying,
doing?
This should be an easy decision for the Buffalo Bills.
All right, there's no graceful way to transition back into sports talk, but the University of Tennessee will play a game next Thursday. We had a conversation yesterday about where the strengths are of this roster, what they have done to improve the weaknesses, and if they are, in fact, a better football team. We'll talk about that coming up next.
The Buck Rising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Visit springhillac.com.
Welcome back on this Friday. College football in full effect. Tomorrow we get underway. Which of these games in week 0 do you think there's going to be the biggest overreaction to? Because I think there's a couple of good nominees on this list. It's just so nice to have college football back in all of our lives. Tonight, you've got West Virginia and Pitt. You have Central Michigan and Oklahoma State. VMI? What is VMI? Is that Virginia Military Institute?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, they're playing Wake Forest on the ACC network. Michigan State, Texas A&M. That's this weekend. Coming up this weekend for a couple of top 25 teams.
Wait. Say it again.
I'm looking at, I'm sorry. I'm on week 1.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay.
Wait, did you say Michigan State, Texas A&M?
No. I said Texas A&M, and then I saw that it was a couple of days later, except it's next weekend. Why will ESPN not show me week 0?
Because you're probably looking at it under the setting of a top 25, and no top 25 teams are playing week 0.
That's really annoying.
The notable games locally, I love that the first college football game of 2022 is right in our backyard with Austin Peay in Western Kentucky.
Yes.
That game is in Bowling Green. Nebraska and Northwestern, and then Vanderbilt and Hawaii to round out the night. As far as games that you could overreact to, you could throw in, I don't know, if Florida State runs Duquesne in week 0, if we'll be talking about the Seminoles, I don't know.
It's got to be Nebraska, right? Like if Nebraska blows it.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's the one that kind of jumps out to me.
It'll be an overreaction one way or another, right? Because if Nebraska kind of rolls, then it's Scott Frost finally righted the ship. If they don't, then it's Scott Frost is done. They lost to a terrible Northwestern team. I don't know much about Northwestern football this year. I believe Tyler Helinski, the former South Carolina quarterback, is their QB there.
That is correct.
But I do know that Northwestern almost never goes back-to-back with poor seasons under Pat Fitzgerald. And they had a really bad year in 2021.
And certainly the aesthetic of Dublin, it'll be an interesting game to watch. So with college football very, very close on the horizon, as a matter of fact, one more sleep, let's talk some Vols. And a question that we kind of brought up yesterday with Pate, and that Lucas and I kind of worked our way through, it felt like. The idea of being a deeper, but not necessarily a better football team. There were, I think, for Tennessee. So let's just kind of re-summarize. It's been long enough. We can kind of reset these things. There were few offenses in football last year as exciting as the University of Tennessee under Josh Heupel. 2.99 plays per minute is obscene. It's the fastest rate of any college football program in the country. They were incredible. They scored 30-plus points in 9 of 13 games. They scored 45-plus in 7 of 13 games. Like, they were out here putting on a show. Now, on the other side of things, the defense was going to be a problem. They're going to give up points again. The question is, all right, how much more confident do you feel with what you have beyond the frontline starters? Because that's the thing that I think keeps you afloat in games for longer. Teams like Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, places that recruit at a high level, you can just roll them off the line. Like, there's no giant talent drop-off the way that there is for a college football program who's still either trying to rebuild in a situation like Tennessee is, or kind of get their feet back under them in ways that make them legitimately competitive. Because what you see is Tennessee and Alabama keep it close for, a half? And then all of a sudden they just roll in the third and fourth quarters because you don't have the kind of players to keep up with them on the defensive side of the ball, and you don't have fresh legs in the second half, and they're gonna crush you because they do, and they have the bigger, better, stronger, and more of them athletes. So now with the University of Tennessee, they certainly struggled against the run, was a big part of this. And now they come in to a season where they've got better depth. I think we can all agree on the collective depth of the roster on that side of the football is better, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. There are more bodies.
More bodies. So in listening to Tim Banks kind of talk about his defense and the place that they are now structurally, for lack of a better term, I think it's kind of important to look at a couple of different areas, especially the place where they started with Tim Banks when they started asking him questions, which is about the defensive backs.
Obviously we have some veterans that have played a lot of football, from Flowers, who I mentioned earlier, to Tank, who's played, obviously, Burrell, who's played. Those guys have played a lot of football for us. But I think they'll be the first ones to tell you, all those guys have been interchangeable all spring and even all fall. So exactly what position those guys will play, we take that first snap on Thursday night. I think we're still working through that. But obviously those three names, jump to mind in terms of we feel pretty good that those guys will be out there in some form or fashion. Just at what position, we'll see.
Picking up on the depth, how has that added depth you feel helped you during preparations here for the season and maybe help your confidence going on that side of the ball going into the season?
Yeah, well, I think it's big, because obviously the style in which we play, we're going to play a ton of snaps. Offense is going to score a ton of touchdowns, and, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to go out there and have success. So, obviously the more players you're able to play, we think the better it is for our long-term future and obviously our immediate success. So we've worked really hard, to make sure everybody is very comfortable with what we're trying to do. We split the groups up. We've tried to even out the reps. Number one, to figure out who our best guys are, but number two, to be able to, have enough depth to be able to move forward and obviously pay dividends moving forward through the season.
That's Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator of the Vols. There's probably 3 players on this roster. Now, I'm looking at this differently than some of you may be, but there's 3 players I know to be known commodities on this defensive roster that I trust.
Okay, name them.
Jeremy Banks, Byron Young, and Tyler Barron.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Will you accept those nominees?
Yes. Now, they have a ton of experience at safety, and they trust Jalen McCullough and Trayvon Flowers and feel comfortable there. Those guys have a ton of snaps under their belt, and I think they're sort of hoping Flowers makes that jump that Theo Jackson made from the second to last year. I don't even know what year this is for Flowers. The COVID stuff has messed it all up. But the second to last year to that final year of eligibility, I think they need Flowers to make that jump. But yes, that is a fair assessment, and the depth at outside linebacker does make that group better because you don't have Byron Young, who's opposite Tyler Barron. You don't have him dealing with this weird eligibility issue that he did early last season, and he had sort of an adjustment process throughout the early part of the year. He's hit the ground running this year. And then there's 2 bodies behind those guys, and James Pierce and Joshua Josephs, true freshmen, that this staff has talked very highly about. That they are going to play this season. So I think you're better at outside linebacker. You're better at linebacker because you really only had 3 guys you could trust last year there. It was Jeremy Banks, Jawan Mitchell, who got hurt, and Aaron Beasley. And now you have those guys, and Solon Page factors in, and Elijah Herring, the freshman out of Riverdale, factors in. There are more bodies, therefore you are better there because you brought back what you had last year. At defensive back is where you are deeper, but I don't know that you're better.
Right.
Because there is no Alante Taylor-type talent in that defensive backfield at the corner spot. There's not a proven Theo Jackson talent back there that can be that versatile option. They have way more bodies than they did a year ago, but I don't know that means the results will be very different.
Warren Burrell is their top returning corner?
Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair assessment?
No, he has the most starts of any corner coming back. And
he allowed a 66% completion rate last year.
He
gave up 15.6 yards per reception.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good situation. Like what you saw in the Music City Bowl against Purdue is essentially what you have in your defensive backfield. That's basically what you have. And Theo Jackson played in that game. Theo Jackson played in that game. Alante Taylor did not. So, and there's been a whole spring and a whole summer and a whole fall training camp.
Yeah,
and you brought in some
can't
freshmen.
characterize it to people that way. The secondary that you saw in the Music City Bowl is what you're rolling with this year because that gives people PTSD.
Sure, and a Tennessee coach, if he was listening, would probably object to that because he'd say, "Now wait a minute, that was in December. This is August.
Yeah,
this is almost a year later, and we have freshmen that have factored in and stepped up there in fall camp, and that's true. But Tennessee is going to need this pass rush to mask some of those deficiencies." They're going to need to get everything they can out of Young and Barron and Josephs and Pierce, that pass rushing core, to mask what you have on the back end. And it's going to hurt them at times this season. Like Will and I were talking about it on UT Pod this week. There's going to be some frustrating moments on defense for Tennessee fans.
That, I think, ends up being the difference between 8 or 9 wins this year. Because they're not a double-digit win team right now. I think that's a fair assessment. I think that's a honest and objective assessment of what I see from the Vols. That's okay. Like that's okay in year 2. As they continue, and we'll see what 2023 ends up bringing and how the success so far in recruiting translates and how those things kind of finalize, there's time for all that. But in year 2, they're probably still a ceiling of an 8 or 9 win team, single digits. How much better this defense holds up. Not necessarily can the defense just outright start stopping teams. I don't have that expectation of any defense in college football not named last year's Georgia squad, right? Because they're just so much more overwhelming than everything else that would be comparable, close to comparable in college football last season. So I'm just operating under the assumption that your average, what's the average college defense give up last year? That's a tough question me to ask you.
I don't know. There's like
CFB Stats has stuff like that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have.
But that's also like 120 teams you're talking about.
I understand that, but like I would imagine like the average defense in the SEC last year is given up at 20 points? Probably. I'd have to go back and fact check that. I may be completely off base. Perhaps we'll do that in a little bit. And when we do a little SEC stat of the day with Vandy coming up next, given that they have a game tomorrow, we can dig in a little more. But that, I think, at least from my perspective, when you're talking about the thing that kind of tips the balances in the Vols' favor to potentially be as good as the second best team in the SEC East this year, which is kind of what everybody's thinking for the most part, how much deeper their defense is and how much longer that helps them hold up or how much more that helps them hold up ends up being the difference in a lot of these games.
I'll say this. The best scoring defense in the SEC last year was obviously Georgia, allowing barely over 10 points per game, which is insane.
Really? Because wasn't it going into Kentucky they were giving up just a little north of 6?
Yes.
It was disgusting.
Yes, but, you could talk about strength of schedule and yada, yada, yada.
I know, but still, 6.
No, it's stupid. It's crazy. Vanderbilt had the worst scoring defense in the SEC last year, giving up almost 36 points per game. So you kind of meet somewhere in the middle there. Tennessee gave up over 29 points per game last year.
Yeah, so like if they get it down to 24, I feel like they got a shot in a lot of these games where we're looking at
that'd be a big jump,
right? That's a significant jump, and also I think people would hear if your scoring defense gives up 25 points per game, that's horrendous. It's just different in the way that college football and scoring is being done. It's so much higher of a rate right now, where even Nick Saban is making some sacrifices defensively because he knows there's only so much you're going to be able to outright stop at this point. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in on the conversation. I think that's probably my biggest outlying question in a season where I'm going in optimistic. I'm overwhelmingly optimistic about the University of Tennessee, but if I'm looking at one place where I think it could crater them, that's the thing that I think we're all kind of circling right now is, okay, how much better actually is this thing than it was a year ago? Steve is in Mount Juliet up next. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Buck. You got me?
Who?
Hello, Buck.
Yep.
Hey, man, I appreciate your input on the Vols this year, and we were all excited. I'm a huge fan, but we're all very excited about what happened last year. And the one thing that I hadn't heard you mention in your analysis of the performance last year was the fact we ended up the season with about 56 scholarship players, where the Georgias, Alabamas, and everybody else had 85.
No, that's a critical point, Steve. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, Tennessee was well below the 85 scholarship player. I don't know what they finished with specifically. I believe they started the season with like 70. And they're still not at 85. The numbers are improved, but Heupel talked about it with 3HL at SEC Media Days. We're still not at 85 scholarship players on this roster.
No, that's something that I completely not factored into my analysis, and of course that matters in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talk about a linebacker. They only trusted 3 players to go out there last year. Literally 3 players at linebacker, at inside linebacker. It was the same at wide receiver. I mean, Alex Golesh talked about it this week. Like, we started the season with about 5, and it basically got down to 3 guys that you could really trust out there. I mean, it was Javonte Payton, who's now at Cardinals camp. It was Velus Jones, and it was Cedric Tillman. Like, Jalen Hyatt produced here and there. Ramel Keaton would come in when
But it wasn't
Payton
the
left,
consistency of the other guys.
Yes. So it wasn't just on defense last year. They were able to overcome a lot of that stuff on offense as well.
So they went 1-4 against ranked teams in the regular season last year, did Tennessee, but they won every game that they were favored in.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of the, if you want to talk in generalities and you want to talk in cliches, the general measuring stick is how you perform in a lot of we talked about Mike Vrabel's record in one-score games yesterday and things that may or may not be sustainable, but he's clearly found a way to do it because they do so much situational football work. I don't know how much more than the average coaching staff. I don't have access to their practice habits the way I do to Mike's. But for something like, for a situation like Heupel, that I think is where you start to see those things manifest. Can you be just generally more competitive against teams that are considered to be higher level in terms of their talent right now? Let's do another stat of the day as we get closer and closer to the college football season. Vandy plays a football game tomorrow against Hawaii, and Lucas will give a stat on them next. So I keep hearing the promos for this bridge building party Slay's throwing tomorrow. What the hell is happening?
Exactly what you think.
Just getting absolutely trashed with Slay before a Titans game. Can we call him? I would like to promote this. Can we call Slay? I mean, I assume we're going to wake him up from a nap, but I want to know exactly what he's got planned because it sounds like he's doing this before every home game, which is trash, frankly, because why am I doing 2 hours of pregame and Slay's out there getting trashed before a game? Who is representing him in these game day discussion or workflow discussions as far as game day is concerned? I feel I got a raw deal now.
You got a job to do on game day.
I mean, yeah, but I can, get something it sounds like at the pregame party to soak up whatever Slay is doing in the bridge building before these games actually take place. So we'll see if Slay's around. We'll see if he's not taking his midday nap as he is accustomed to doing. But first, let's get a Vanderbilt SEC stat of the day.
The stat of the day for the Vanderbilt Commodores is 2.5. 2.5. That's the over-under win total that most major sports books have Vanderbilt at this season.
Jesus Christ.
Which means if you took the over or the under on that total, that tomorrow night is very important for you.
Yeah. 9:30 p.m. is when they open at Hawaii on CBS Sports Network?
Yes, CBS Sports Network.
I don't know if I get that channel. I'm assuming I do.
Well, either way, I have no idea what that game's going to look like. I have no idea.
I don't know enough about Hawaii this year.
And it doesn't even matter that I don't know enough about Hawaii because last year I knew how bad Vanderbilt was going to be and how long the road ahead was for Clark Lee, but I did not see them getting blown out by ETSU in week 1. So I have no clue what to expect. A deeper Vanderbilt team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, how I expect them to perform at Hawaii. They've been there all week, so I don't think the time change will be that big of an issue, but I just have no clue what we're looking for.
They're pretty decent favorites.
Hawaii or Vanderbilt?
No, Vandy. Okay. They're 9.5-point favorites right now.
Yeah. I mean, look, this Vanderbilt defense, I think, is going to be markedly improved.
Okay.
Bringing back Anthony Orji in the middle of that defense. Kane Patterson is a very underrated transfer in the grand scheme of things in the SEC this year. It's a former high 4-star prospect that was committed to Ohio State, ended up going to Clemson. He transfers back to Vanderbilt. He's going to play with his younger brother, Langston. Both of them are CPA products. So their defense with Clark Lee, I think, will be much better. But as far as the offense goes, I just have no idea what Vanderbilt is going to be able to rely on this year. Does that make sense? On offense? Like when they need a first down, when they need to choose some clock near the end of the game, protect the lead, I have no idea what they can turn to. Like Mike Wright might be, he's an exciting player. He can run.
He's a good story.
He can improvise. He's a great story.
I don't know how that translates on the field.
You can see the talent is there. I mean, really fun kid to listen to when he talks. He goes about things the right way, but I don't know, man. I mean, they return some guys on the offensive line. They lose their left tackle to Alabama. Tyler Steen's probably going to start for Alabama at left tackle.
Yeah, how about that? Vandy getting poached in the transfer portal by places like Bama. That stinks.
So I just don't know what to expect from this offense. I know the defense will be better, and they can win 3, maybe 4 games.
Okay, well, let's that's the obvious question then here next, because let me give you their schedule, okay? And I'm gonna, because the stat of the day is 2.5, which is the projected win total for the Vanderbilt Commodores. And the question that I'm going to pose to you and everybody within the sound of my voice is, can you find three wins?
Find the wins, okay.
At Hawaii to open.
We'll go ahead and call that one
if
a possible
win.
win.
9.5-point road favorites, it would be well, how about this? We will find out a lot about Vanderbilt tomorrow.
We will.
Let us say that on the front end. Elon. They have Elon as the home opener, which is an FCS program.
Winnable.
They are hosting Wake Forest, a ranked team without a starting quarterback. Mm-hmm. It's worth noting, but I don't necessarily know that that's enough to completely derail Wake against a team like Vandy. At Northern Illinois, at Alabama, hosting Ole Miss. They are at number 3 currently, Georgia, at Missouri, hosting South Carolina, at Kentucky, and they finished the last 2 games at home against Florida and obviously the University of Tennessee. So my depth of knowledge about Northern Illinois' football program is it's not there. We talked about the K-State quarterback that was at the Manti Te'o.
Colin Klein.
Who was the Northern Illinois quarterback?
Jordan Lynch.
Jordan Lynch.
Yeah.
Because he ended up going to the Bears as a running back, I think.
He put up stupid numbers when he was at Northern Illinois.
They were a fun offense to watch for that for a couple of seasons while he was there.
But they're coming off a 9-win season in the MAC. It's a good program.
All right, so let's assume that 9 wins in the MAC is good enough to make you more competitive against a team like Vanderbilt. I don't know that I find 3 wins here.
Yeah, I don't either. I think the Northern Illinois
you go 2-0,
game,
and then that's about as good. That's about as immaculate as the vibes are going to get for the Commodores to start the season.
I don't see an SEC win. Dari Noka of SEC Network was out there this week saying 4-0 for Vanderbilt to start the season.
Oh, bleep off.
Oh, he's got wins against
Over
Wake Forest.
Wake?
Yep, he's got him beating Wake at home. A Sam Hartman-less
Can
Wake
we
Forest.
get Dari on? I did his radio show a couple of times with him and Mel Kiper. I haven't talked to him since then. It may be a stretch to ask for a home and home 3 years removed from the Titans playoff run when I used to do some ESPN radio hits with him and Mel. But Dari obviously is one of the primary voices on the SEC network. That's not inconsequential, but also he sounds like he's drunk.
4-0. That was his called shot for Vanderbilt in the first 4 weeks. That Wake Forest game is also it's interesting. I mean,
No, you know what? The last time, because they would be 3-0, and the last time that happened, they beat K-State. I was still doing the press box PA as a starving, fresh out of college kid, and I can't remember the name of the defensive tackle that looked into the face of the camera and said, "We won Alabama." They got Alabama the next week, and they got literally rolled 56-0. So. They would host, or they would go at Northern Illinois after beating Wake Forest theoretically, and then they would be at Bama. So I don't know that they would necessarily be the same trumpeting of "we want Bama" in that moment.
I mean, you just need improvement. Like 2 wins, 3 wins is improvement under Clark Lee.
But back-to-back seasons without a conference win, that would be difficult to quantify as progress for people. I think.
But. It's just a different situation at Vanderbilt. And Clark Lee, the mountain that he had to climb when he took that job, everybody knew it.
Yeah, but we say that about every one of them that comes into these jobs. Yeah. Into that job specifically.
That's what that job is. It's just what it is.
I want them to be good. I don't even want them to be good. I want them to be fun. Just be fun.
They brought in a top 40 class in this past cycle, which is really good by Vanderbilt standards. And Clark Lee's going to develop talent. He's going to probably send a couple guys to the NFL, when everything is said and done there in his time at Vanderbilt, however long that lasts. But just need to see improvement. I'm looking forward to seeing what they show on offense tomorrow.
Brandon writes in the Zone TV chat, would be tough to lose to a Rainbow. Yeah, especially as a 9.5-point road favorite. You can't have that. 615-737-1045. Again, Vandy at Hawaii, 9:30 Central Time is when that game will be played on CBS Sports Network. With the Titans having their last preseason game coming up, there are going to be some difficult decisions on this roster that end up being made. We are going to talk about several of them, specifically backup quarterback and corner depth. Coming up next, you're going to hear from Greg Cosell of NFL Film, some really good insights and analysis. Your phone calls as well. 1045 The Zone.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Tennessee Titans wrap up the 2022 preseason Saturday night at Nissan Stadium against the Arizona Cardinals. The Lee Company countdown to kickoff hitting the air at 3 p.m. Titans countdown starts at 5 and kickoff with Mike Keith, Coach Mack, and the rest of the Titans radio crew is at 6. Nolensville baseball beat Texas 7-1, advancing to the U.S. Championship in the Little League World Series on Thursday. They will play Hawaii for the U.S. title, who they lost to earlier this week. That game will happen tomorrow at 2:30. Speaking of Hawaii, that is where Vanderbilt football is. They have been all week preparing for their Week 0 opener against the Rainbow Warriors. A late kick in that one, 9:30 to start Year 2 of the Clark Lee era. But Week 0 will officially start Saturday morning with Austin Peay in Western Kentucky at 11 a.m. before Northwestern and Nebraska face off in Dublin at 11:30. Nashville Soccer Club back on the road Saturday at Vancouver, a late 9 p.m. kick. NSC is currently 6th in the Western Conference table. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once in your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Call it third down on a Friday. Things we love to see. Welcome in. Welcome back if you've been hanging out. We're happy to have you. Lucas Panzica, myself, we are with you on this Friday and Monday through Friday here on 104.5 The Zone until 1 o'clock. Your phone calls, they're welcome. 615-737-1045. You can give us any observations, any things that you're looking forward to tomorrow at Nissan Stadium. Titans and Cardinals, as you heard Lucas say. A lot of pregame coverage for you. A lot of different and difficult, specifically, decisions to make for the Tennessee Titans and 31 other NFL franchises with roster cuts less than a week away. Final roster cuts. I am so looking forward to. I felt just general fatigue this week at training camp. Not from us specifically. Because I always think we do a good show, but just from people, like talking to people around training camp, they're like, all right, enough. Like our friend Laura Oakman, who, by the way, has the game week 1 for Fox. Giants and Titans would be swell to get Laura on the show at some point in week 1. I'll have to make sure that her schedule might be able to accommodate, but I think it was just generally a conversation of, we were talking about, the amount of people, how many people come up to you, Lucas, and be like, are you ready for football season? You psyched? You jacked up? And he's like, yeah, it's basically been going on since February when the combine started. It hadn't really gone anywhere, but now actual things of substance, concrete football games to work off of, and before we get there, roster cuts to make. So players that are obviously going to be under a lot of scrutiny for the third straight week in a row, guys that we have sample sizes of, and the progress of the work that they're doing in practice. I present to you no bigger name that's probably going to play substantial snaps. Whether he starts is the question. But Malik Wallace. And Greg Cosell and I spent a lot of time on Malik on this week's episode of The Install. And basically, you look at the progress and you say, okay, that's great, because he's clearly making progress. But you still have to grade it on the scale of, all right, what does he need to be a finished product? And that was the way that kind of Greg put it back to me when we discussed on Wednesday's episode.
I'm sure. Yeah, I thought it was still a tough outing for him during the game. I'm obviously not seeing practice.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're working on this with him, but he needs much work on his footwork and his set in the pocket. It's just not clean. It's not precise. So what happens when that's the case is you tend to rush your upper body and your delivery. And what that does as well is everything comes out too hot. He really needs to work on being able to throw with some pace and touch. Another thing that does stand out when you watch tape is he has a tendency to drift off the midline on his drop into the pocket. The result of that, Buck, is that you can often create your own pressure because you're drifting away. You're drifting into your blockers. So you're creating your own pressure. That showed up as well. So he clearly needs work. None of this is a surprise. I'm sure it's not a surprise to the Titans. And, you know, the system he played in college was essentially a one-read system, and he still has many of those elements to his game. He doesn't see the field really well yet. So this is a learning process for him. I did read today as we do this that he apparently had a good day. You know, it'll be a process. It will take some time.
So that's Greg Cosell talking about the current stages of the process that Malik Willis is in right now. And for those of you who heard the interview with him on Wednesday, because we had him on the show in our last training camp broadcast, he talked about the operations as well and kind of the acclimation to just generally huddling and operating the huddle as a professional quarterback, how much of a process that's been for him. And kind of gives you a good sample size of, okay, when you see him out there and he's making plays and he's running around and he's got the arm strength and all these different things, you know what stands out to me, though, about Malik's throwing ability? I went back and watched, because we talked about a lot of different quarterbacks on this week's episode, too, and Kenny Pickett was one of them. So I went back and watched a pretty good chunk of the Steelers-Jags preseason game. So I got a good measure of Lawrence and a good measure of Pickett, and guys like that, a fellow rookie and a second-year player who has struggles of his own for different reasons, kind of where Malik, what they look like compared to what it is that I'm watching on Saturdays so far, these last 2 Saturdays. And what I see from Malik that's different, most notably different, about him versus those other 2 players, understanding that there are fundamental differences with all 3 of them anyway, there is nothing but fastballs coming out of Malik Wallace, man. He is out here ripping it through wide receivers' face masks. And there is a time and place for that. There are some critical spots in an NFL game or on a field of play that he is just going to outright have to muscle it in there. But what they call layering throws, what scouts talk about when they say layering throws or feathering throws, making a throw to an open receiver but over a defender in coverage. Layering of the throws or feathering of the throws, he does not have that ability right now. Touch is just generally something that you look at with him outside of the mechanical stuff, outside of the operations, but things that I get a better picture of the more time I spend watching through his stuff. Especially, I really think it's helpful for if you want to get an actual measure of what this dude is. Like Trey Lance last night. I know he didn't play that much, but Trey Lance is dealing with some of these similar difficulties. He had some accuracy issues.
I just watched him miss George Kittle in the right flat.
Oh, really? I have NFL Network on right now. I'm surprised they're not showing highlights from this. And I had some general observations from the Prime broadcast anyway. But like Malik Willis versus these other quarterbacks in terms of their technical proficiency and their operational ability, he's not there yet. I don't think this final preseason game is going to be the tipping point. Is anybody looking around at the backup quarterback battle and being like, yeah, if he looks great, if he's out there making plays, if he's out there making 21-yard throws and 17-yard scrambles, bleep Logan Woodside. He's our guy. I don't think anybody's saying that process is done after Saturday.
If Malik Willis takes another step, like you would agree he took a step week 1 to week 2 in the preseason.
Yeah, but it's such a small one.
Sure. But if he shows improvement in week 3 again and Woodside has a similar performance, there are absolutely going to be people saying, why would they keep 3 quarterbacks?
Well, and okay, no, that's fair.
That people are already saying that. Just put Woodside on the practice squad.
Well, and I think that's a fine. By the way, I think that's a completely tenable solution. If you think you got other needs and you think that basically what you're gambling on here is, can he clear waivers? Can Logan Woodside clear waivers? Can you get him on the practice squad? I tend to think you can. I mean, I'm looking at the backup quarterback situations, and none of them are good. Like Joe Flacco is going to be a week 1 starter as a backup, but when's the last time you felt good about the ability of Joe Flacco as a professional football player?
Like, I half joked on Blaine and Mickey the other week that, who's going to pick up Woodside? Is that Arthur Smith?
Yeah.
But you've got Marcus Mariota down there. Desmond Ridder has had a nice preseason from what I've seen in Atlanta. So I don't know that Art would try and nab Woodside.
No, but you can't rule it out. Like, I mean,
you can.
Clearly, they literally have half the roster.
Yeah.
Half of the jettison pieces and parts. You don't think that the Falcons are going to cut below 53 and then come up with a few extra Titans cast-offs? Probably. You know, that's just the way that coaches work. They want guys they know. They want guys they trust. They want guys that they have familiarity with, because that's the biggest thing. It's, can I trust you, and can you be physically out there? Beyond that, we'll figure everything else out. And that's kind of the objective of the coach each and every week. Now, there's a couple of different positions that are also going to be worth keeping an eye on. But if you ask me today, is Logan Woodside a part of the let's just say it this way. Is Logan Woodside a part of the Titans organization, active roster or practice squad, by next Wednesday morning?
Yes.
The answer is likely yes.
Yes.
David is in Nashville, wants to talk some Titans. Hello, David.
Hey, what's going on, Buck?
How are you?
I'm doing well. I've heard a lot of talk, maybe keeping 3 quarterbacks, but talking about punters, could we keep 2 punters? Is that absurd?
Yes. Yes, I would say. Oh, well, they had 2 field goal kickers on the roster. When Suckup was dealing with, let me not completely dismiss David that way, because I get why he's saying that.
Yeah, but I think it's a different situation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess, but it was Suckup on a bum leg, who was still on the active roster, and then Ryan Santoso, who I think just recently got cut from the Jags, but he wasn't kicking field goals. Like, they still were using Suckup on field goals, and Santoso, I guess, was the kickoff specialist, and he had a weird onside kick that didn't really work. So they did at one time have 2 place kickers on the active roster, even if their functions were different. Carl in White Bluff is next. Hello, Carl. Carl, you got me?
Well, yeah.
What's up, bud?
Yeah, I was wondering, could Logan Woodside maybe be tanking a little bit, so that maybe, because he knows that Marcus Mariota's in Atlanta and he may get a chance to get on the field a lot faster?
Well, I don't think that would be a possibility, that Logan Woodside is tanking. No, I just respectfully, Logan, I just don't think he's a very good quarterback, you know?
No, individual players do not tank.
That would be funny, though.
That would be funny. You got to be real sure of yourself.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
no,
my guy Carl is out here is thinking that Logan Woodside is conspiring because he has options.
Woodside
what?
Is doing everything in his power to remain on an NFL roster as long as he possibly can.
He's out here conspiring against the Titans organization because he thinks he's got a soft landing spot. Stop it. I do like the premise, though. I wish that I
do like the idea of players individually tanking.
I wish that I had that kind of creativity. Like, I'm jealous of Carl in White Bluff today, because it never occurred to me that Logan Woodside would be actively out here trying to sabotage his teammates.
Like, who's a player that could actively tank in the NFL to get out of a situation and land in a better spot?
Not active, but Jay Cutler. And I don't know why I'm doing it. I think it's not like, I don't know that Cutler would ever actually do that, but like, he just gives off like, yeah, all right, bleep it.
Right. No, I'm talking about like actively, like, I'm going to play terribly this game. I'm going to play really, really bad in this entire training camp so that I can land somewhere. Like if Deebo Samuel didn't get his deal or something.
Yeah.
Well, nobody wouldn't do that because he wants a big deal, and you're not going to get a big deal if you're not playing well.
Right. It just doesn't.
It's a hilarious concept.
Devin Wheeler on YouTube in the Zone TV chat says Carl is unaware of Desmond Ridder, because it's not. I mean, and like Marcus looked fine in the preseason.
Yeah, they've both looked okay.
Their offensive line though is garbage, so bad. If you're looking for any kind of Marcus Mariota resurgence in 2022, I would pray to the football gods above that they keep that man upright, because you've seen what that experience can be like if he is not adequately protected.
Can we put that to a poll?
What?
Name an NFL player that could benefit from actively tanking their performance.
Let's not do this from my Twitter account though, then, because you're then recklessly speculating about allegations that I'm making from my account. about players in the league who would be who actively look like they're tanking. That's a terrible thing.
What do
for
you
me
mean? No, it's not accusing anybody. It's just I'm just asking the people.
Well, you're asking people, not the people high and mighty back there. Relax. All right. If you want to put that out from my account at Buck Rising, make sure it's phrased properly so I'm not here out actively accusing NFL players of tanking in ways that are going to blow up in my face. You remember last year I got in that fight with Darius Leonard on Twitter and I had immediately to backtrack?
What
do you mean?
You got in a fight with Shaq Leonard.
Oh, bleep you. We'll talk more Titans next.
The Buck Rising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Visit springhillac.com.
Welcome back. Titans and Cards on your radio airwaves, your 104.5 The Zone app. Titans Radio got you covered. We'll start you off. Blaine, Mickey, myself. Lee Company countdown to kickoff 3 p.m. tomorrow across the top. Well, I guess that's just on 104.5 The Zone, and then the game itself with Titans Countdown across the Titans Radio Network. And, of course, our pregame hit, Jimmy Wyatt and I in the booth with Rep Brian 15 minutes before kickoff, right before you hear from Mike Vrabel. Are you going to be in the booth with me tomorrow?
I will be there.
Why? What? So what? Who are you leveraging to get all these cool side perks out of your current position?
I have a lot of information on a lot of people.
It would seem that way.
It's the only reason I work here.
Excellent. Okay. Well, this is have you been in that booth before
yes,
on a game day?
I have, yes. Not on I've been in there, but not for the full game broadcast. Like I remember doing remember when they did Tigers Radio?
Yes.
So I remember working that game. Yeah. That was a really cool thing, which those floods were almost exactly a year ago. I think last Friday marked the 1 year anniversary of those floods in Waverly.
There's still so much damage there.
Yeah. But, man, that football program and that community really did bounce back and rally. So that was really cool. But, yeah, so looking forward to being in that booth for the remainder of the season.
All right. So Lucas will be there. I'll be there. Many of you will be there. And what are you going to be watching when you're in Nissan Stadium for these difficult decisions that need to be made? We talked about Malik Wallace and the idea of Logan Woodside's presence on the roster, what that will mean for him and his progress. Now, I think that as you sit here looking at the idea, I'm honestly pissed at you, Lucas, that you distracted me with your Darius Leonard joke.
No, it's Shaq.
Shaq Leonard joke. Because I was like stalling out because I wanted to call him Shaq Mason, which I knew wasn't right. It's just that I don't associate with that first name with that last name.
Joke? Where was the joke?
You made a joke at the end.
Did I make a joke or did I say his proper name?
You said the proper name. You know what you did.
That's going to make so many people angry.
I had a really good
season.
tease and you blew it. That's what I'm saying to you because now I can't remember what I teased. All I know is we were talking about roster competitions, and I'm very upset with you about the idea of what I've now lost. So let's look at another position that's going to be heavily scrutinized on Saturday, and I will tell you that how much this individual plays is going to tell you a lot about whether they are going to be a quote-unquote starter for this defense in week 1. I talked to Greg Cosell about Caleb Farley and Roger McCreary, and I want you to hear the exchange because Roger obviously made his debut on Saturday against the Bucks. He played less than 20 snaps, but did get a lot of good work in. And then just extended work from Caleb Farley, you felt good about the sample size that you saw. But what Greg and I talked about, as far as the players' skill sets are concerned, that was kind of what we went through on Wednesday's episode of The Install.
Farley at times in mirror match press man would get out of phase and lose contact with the receiver. But he again showed his explosiveness, planting and driving on routes in front of him. They used McCreary on a play just the way they used Molden last year as the fourth rusher in a four-man, what we call zone exchange pressure concept, meaning that it's only 4 pass rushers, but one of them is the slot corner, and it was McCreary. Mm-hmm. And that's a foundation of what the Titans do. So we'll see. That's probably a pretty good battle. Is in your mind Molden going to be the slot corner? How is this going to play out? Do we know?
He didn't practice today. I think if all things were equal, Greg, because of what McCreary is super comfortable doing already on the outside and how good Molden is as a slot player and was down the stretch for them last year, I think that it would be Molden in the slot, McCreary and Fulton on the outside. And they'd probably find ways to get Caleb Farley on the field in different looks. But if
you think right now that McCreary has the edge over Farley,
I almost like the right tackle situation, Greg. I don't necessarily think it's all that close.
Really?
So that was a portion of the conversation. I shocked Greg Cosell, I did, with my corner takes. But that's what we're seeing at practice. Because I put that out on Twitter the other day, just as a general observation. I think it was the day that Radens did not play a snap in practice at tackle. and worked exclusively on the inside. It was something to the effect of, if Elijah Molden's healthy, then Roger McCreary is your starting outside corner opposite Christian Fulton. And then immediately questions about Farley. Well, what about Farley? Does this mean that Farley sucks? Is Farley a bust? Blah, 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 blah. Farley. No, doesn't mean that at all. They're just going to put the best players out there to give them the best possible advantages to succeed. Now, there may be some situations where Farley is a better matchup, depending on the offense that they're facing, than McCreary is. I don't necessarily know what that matchup is right now, but those are the things that will be taken into consideration. It's not like one, again, quote unquote, starting. It just means literally who comes out on the field for the first defensive snap. It doesn't mean that the other guy's just not going to play. Of course, that's nonsense. But I think that for Caleb Farley, watching him and the kind of technical stuff that he has to clean up, it's not close between him and McCreary. They're not playing the position on the same wavelength, on the same level. And I think that's okay. It's just that Roger McCreary, instead of a luxury pick, you kind of see more of the general sense of the organization was heading at the time of the NFL draft, when on the second or on day 2 in the second round, they took McCreary. And we all looked around like, another corner? What? And they're just looking at it, yes, an insurance policy from a player we know can play. And that's exactly what he's done. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. Decisions that are going to be made after Saturday's game is what we're talking about. The one of the most consequence, is it punter? I don't think I could objectively say that. Like, I think the punter thing is important, but I don't think it's the most important decision they're going to make.
Yeah, it is one of the toughest decisions they're going to make.
It's a tough decision. It is tougher more by the nature of the individuals involved than it is by the importance of the position. Let's say it that way. Not that the punter is completely unimportant. Clearly, this franchise's most important player, most valuable player in the last 10 years has been the punter. Backup quarterback, though, to me, edges that out. Inside linebacker maybe edges that out. I don't necessarily know what. I mean, we asked Coach Mack about this earlier in the first hour, for those of you who missed it. The idea that Joe Jones, Jack Gibbons, or Gibson.
Just call him Dr. Gibby. It is Gibbons.
Why is it so hard for me to remember that dude's last name?
It is Gibbons.
It escapes me. Dr. Gibby. I feel goofy calling him Dr. Gibby. It's like that one time I like blanked out in a Mike Vrabel Zoom and I called Jadeveon Clowney JD the way that he does. And I'm like, oh, you dope. You don't know that guy. Don't call him JD. Gross. Dr. Gibby. I don't know Gibbons like that. Gibson, Gibbons. It's Gibbons. But Chance Campbell, another player, late round draft pick this year. What is their function? And basically the answer is, well, yeah, they can play inside linebacker, but also they got to be core special teamers if they're going to keep them around. So in looking at that, it is easy to forget the special teams component of things. But like, for example, I think that the running back depth is probably set. But if you're going to see any kind of variance in the numbers, it would be because of special teams impact. Again, I come back to like kick returner and things like that. Trenton Cannon, can he provide that value and also play running back better than you would get if you kept Dontrell Hilliard, Hassan Haskins, Derrick Henry, and a fullback? Do you need that fifth running back just because of the return stuff? And those are, of course, the most important decisions that are going to be made. But we made mention of this yesterday, and Ryan Tannehill was asked about it Wednesday. The idea of playing in the preseason game. I mentioned, for those of you who were listening to the show yesterday, I think in the noon hour, that the Titans PR director had sent me how many offensive starters, started the third preseason game. There were 6 of them. Now, Tannehill wasn't one of the 6, but the idea that he kind of, said, I don't really feel like I need to play in the preseason game. I feel I've gotten some good work in practice, but I'll do whatever the coaching staff wants me to do. So I guess I would rule him out ahead of Saturday's game. The other starters, I think you might see more than we would otherwise expect. And for Ryan Tannehill, the command that he's taking right now, I'm almost kind of reevaluating my position about whether I'd want to see him play. because I think I'm pretty strongly entrenched in the idea that I don't want to see him out there. There is more bad than good that can come from that. And I think I'm still in that space. But I don't think it's necessarily the worst idea to see if the command that Diana Rossini talked about when she watched Ryan Tannehill in practice yesterday, or last week, rather, if the command that we're seeing on a daily basis and that she saw while she was in town, if that translates to something like a preseason game.
He said hello to introduce himself, and I just was thrown off. Because I didn't expect him to have such a great on-air voice.
What
like
is
that.
this?
And it's hard for me to compliment you, but if I have to, the day I met you, I think you have an incredible voice. I don't always agree or love the things you say, but I think your voice resonates, and it's honestly a gift. And I'm glad that you're using it in a good way by being a broadcaster. That said, Lucas, where did this come from? And I think he just needs a bigger role in the show.
What are you doing?
That was my takeaway.
Is this the wrong clip?
Because you imagine what people look like, what they sound like when you don't really get to be around them, and I was very thrown off. So I'm excited to know that if you die, you step right in.
Was that the wrong? Did I push it? I'll find the right thing.
Are you proud of yourself for what you just did there?
I got the labels mixed up.
What is wrong with you? What are you doing?
Didn't mean to put that back out in the universe.
You didn't get enough of that yesterday? Look at you. You're swooning because Diana Rossini said something nice about you. Unbelievable. Just the way she ended that. I need that clipped for social media.
If you die.
If you were to die. Not should something happen to you and you have to miss some time. Not your vocal cords just finally give out. You're no longer able to speak or yell into a microphone. But if you were to die, nobody would miss you because Lucas could come sit in your chair and everybody would be fine.
Yeah, that was an accident.
That's a really, really great thing for my friend Diana to say to me. Now, can I hear her talk about the quarterback, please?
Ryan Tannehill, to me, seems different this year in the best way. Last camp this time last year, I was actually going through my notebook from last summer, and he'd been struggling with a lot of just turnovers, interceptions in camp, and he didn't really have a strong one. It was just okay. And see this year, just from having conversations with people in the organization, but also from what I was able to see, he physically, his just like overall presence seems very different to me, first of all, which I think is fantastic, knowing what he's coming off of and knowing what he dealt with in this offseason. He looks like the driver of this team, the owner of this, like that. He has a vibe about him. All right, so let's put that aside. Just my simple observations of a quarterback. And I've seen a lot of quarterbacks this offseason. Like, I know what they look like. I know what they stand, how they talk, what they look like in a huddle, just their presence. And he has an incredible one right now. I really like the space he's in. In terms of on-the-field play, he's not throwing as many interceptions.
Yeah.
He's just not. And everyone I talk to there just tells me he's having a really strong camp. And there could be a million reasons for it. Could it be motivation? Could it be the fact that I'm flying out of Nashville and, the cover of the sports section is Malik Wallace, which is fantastic. And I love the idea that Malik could one day be the future. But that is not happening this year. Not happening. It is so clearly Ryan Tannehill's team. And while it's cool that they've got another game plan for when the days that Ryan, drifts off, back down to Florida to spend the rest of his life, for now, I think Ryan's got a chip on his shoulder. He knows the last time we saw him, it was an absolute meltdown heartbreak for the entire city. So all of this piled together, I think Titans fans should be so pumped.
That's Diana Rossini of ESPN actually talking about the quarterback.
That was the one.
Okay. Thank you for finding the right clip that time. I'm so happy we worked through the kinks on that. Jerk. So, Malik Wallace not yet ready. Cosell, from film, from reporting, from talking to coaches, from all these different things, you are dealing with a still very, very raw commodity as far as the backup quarterback is concerned, as far as the rookie backup quarterback is concerned. And so we'll see how much progress he makes. We'll talk about that in great detail with Blaine Bishop and Mickey Ryan tomorrow when we do the Lee Company Countdown to Kickoff. And in fact, I'm gonna for those of you who want to listen to that pregame show before Titans Countdown starts, we're also going to play a little bit of the Malik Wallace interview that we did about some things. And I'd be curious to get Blaine's reaction off of what Malik had to say to us on the show on Wednesday. We have some SEC news before we do some polls. Is it worthy of laser light shows or no?
Not yet.
Not yet. What do you mean?
Appears to be a developing story.
Okay, well, can you give me the details other than looking at me doe-eyed and saying saying in my ear we have news?
Right. Well, it has to do with.
What do you mean, right? You weren't expecting the follow-up after you said in my ear while I'm talking we have news? What happened there?
It has to do with what's the word Harsin used at media days?
Oh God, I don't
inquiry.
Know. What? An inquiry
down on the plains.
An inquiry going on at Auburn? Okay. Well, then should we tease it? Or do we not have information beyond that?
All right. You know what?
Breaking sports news on 104.5 The Zone.
I asked you to tease some news, which means we've got SEC news, and we'll be right back.
You didn't ask me to tease bleep.
You did the opposite of that.
You said we have some news.
I said tease some news.
I did not hear that in my ear. Speak louder.
If Robert were here, he would say, Mom and Dad, stop fighting. Pete Thamel of ESPN, source, Auburn and athletic director Alan Green are in negotiations regarding his imminent departure from the school. He has only 5 months remaining on his contract. Some finality is expected today, and he continues, according to sources. Green had asked Auburn for clarity about his future with his deal expiring in January, and Auburn was likely to wait until the end of football season to make a decision, which led to Green finding an exit strategy.
Ooh.
That is the AD that hired Brian Harsin at Auburn.
That makes Brian Harsin's situation infinitely more complicated. That is decent news. I think that's worthy of laser light shows. Why couldn't you just say that on the front end? Why'd you have to do all this subterfuge about inquiries and whatnot and try to recall things that nobody remembers from SEC media days?
I remember.
Just read the tweet. Last call for phone calls. Polls next. Wrapping up for the week. Last segment for us. You're not done with me, by the way. Blaine and Mickey. I'm hanging out with them for what? At 1:20, and then Lee Company countdown to kickoff on Saturday. Fired up for game day. Good to see a lot of different people out there last week. Looking forward to seeing more of y'all out there on Saturday evening. Just quickly, thank you, as always, for letting us do this stupid and silly show that we get to do for 3 hours a day. We appreciate the way that you guys support it. It is always hugely gratifying. Not quite, though, as gratifying as what it seems is happening with Lucas back there in the studio. You were cackling at the demise of the Auburn athletic director and the timing.
What are you talking about?
No. You stop it. You hijacked a segment about serious quarterback analysis just to have Diana compliment your voice.
Not allowed to make mistakes. Not allowed to make mistakes anymore.
No, it's the rate of the mistakes that make it, true to form. You were cackling at the demise of the athletic director at Auburn. Auburn has announced that their athletic director is leaving. And the timing of this recent commit for Auburn, who has had difficulties, let's say, keeping talent and getting talent back on track with Brian Harsin as the coach and the embattlements that he's dealt with lately, you were cackling at the idea that as their athletic director decides that he is probably out, or somebody decided that he was out, this 4-star wide receiver just committed to the school.
It was more of the way he committed to Auburn. Yeah, I have no ill will toward Alan Green or Auburn athletics.
I looked up during the break and saw you howling with laughter.
Yes, because I watched DeQuavius Sori out of Campbellton, Florida, Chipley High School, a 4-star wide receiver prospect, the number 22 receiver in the class of 2023 per 247 Sports. He sat down in his high school gym with 4 hats in front of him: Alabama, Auburn, Miami, and Florida. He put on the Alabama hat to some cheers. One of his teammates, of the many that were standing behind him, come up to him and they say, no. They take the Bama hat off his head. He puts the Miami hat on. Another teammate steps up, wags his finger, takes the Miami hat off. He puts the Florida hat on. Same thing. A teammate removes it from his head. And then he pulls a backpack from under the table that has like a tiger tail on it. And he pulls out an Auburn hat and puts that on.
What would it would be the best thing to happen on the internet this year if they came back, did another video, and one of the teammates puts the Alabama hat back on his head, right? Just takes the Auburn one, throws it to the side, puts the Alabama hat back on his head, or whichever one. Yeah, that's not ideal. I feel bad for kids like that. Do you get tired of the recruiting or commitment antics? Because like some of them are funny to me, and some of them are like, all right, enough of this already.
Yeah, I mean, they're entertaining, but yeah, I'm with you that, I think Peyton Manning was talking about he's like, I'm old school. I don't like the hat reveal or anything like that.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to sound like crotchety old Peyton Manning. Get off my lawn, Peyton Manning.
I think it's cool for kids to highlight that moment. I think some of the antics are funny. I'm all good with it. But I also love the way Arch Manning did it, like the highest profile recruiting prospect in the modern era, and he didn't do anything.
I don't know what he sounds like.
I have watched interviews with him. You can't find any interviews with Arch Manning that are not just local Louisiana high school football reporters. Yeah. And I like that. I appreciate that.
Okay, very good. I like polls.
I'm going to make you an offer.
Clip that,
you can't refuse. Because the polls have closed and the votes have been tallied. It's time for a poll update. And he's a good boy. Buck Rising show producer and correspondent, Lucas Panzica.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford. You can custom order any new Ford from Two Rivers. They will deliver it to you when it is manufactured. Aaron Donald swinging helmets at a joint practice. Assault or just football things? 61% say assault.
Yes, it's football things. The football player doing football at times when he's not supposed to be doing football. Assault.
Yes. Orange Stormtrooper says, assault if he's swinging at the two players without helmets. I don't condone it doing it to players with helmets on, but at least they have some protection. Not that it exempts it from being assault.
That's just enough with the mental gymnastics. It's a football player being a football player.
It's
assault. Like that's what they do.
It is. Yeah, no, they hit and tackle each other. They don't swing with clubs.
And when they are in a blind, mouth-foaming rage, they swing helmets at one another. Or they put, they're dopes and they punch each other with their helmets on. Like, this is what football players do.
Like, can we have enough respect for football players as humans to understand that they know there is a line between fighting and shoving and punching and swinging helmets as weapons?
Yes, but not defensive linemen and offensive linemen. I remove the humanity from them.
Where does Texas A&M, let's see what some of the Titans feel about that. Where does Texas A&M finish in the SEC West? 44%, the majority say third, presumably behind Arkansas. 30% say second, 21% say fourth or worse, 5% say champs.
What's the justification for Arkansas being that much lower in the AP poll? Have you seen any discussion around that? Because A&M at 6 and Arkansas at 19, it does not compute to me.
They're just not as talented. I mean, it's fairly simple. Arkansas is not as talented as Texas A&M.
Okay, but are they? This is we can have a conversation around this later on next week ahead of SEC play. But it's to me, it is frustrating to see the way that some of the metrics are done on this. When, like, what did Josh Pate outline yesterday about the quarterback situation at Baylor? They don't return the quarterback, so the snaps necessarily aren't returning to give them the amount of experience that these things would be accounting for, but also the new quarterback is better, and that does not account for returning snaps.
Yeah. 2.5 wins for Vandy football, over or under? 69% nice, say over.
I think I'm going under. I think I'm going 2 wins. I did not find a third win on that schedule.
Mr. Pineapple says, always expect Vandy to lose until proven otherwise.
Is that the same Mr. Pineapple that used to be in the pineapple outfit at Mariota Titans games?
Oh, I don't know.
What happened to that guy?
Yeah, so he hasn't been around since Mariota left.
I don't know what he looks like without the pineapple gear on.
Fair.
I know. It was the most not to disrespect the man, but I wasn't exactly paying attention to his face.
Which is the most important decision the Titans will need to make after Saturday's preseason game? Austin says, which nickel corner they're going to trade for an O-lineman?
Which nickel corner they're going to trade for an O-lineman? Are they just stockpiling defensive backs to use as trade capital? That'd be fun.
Kenneth says punter.
Yeah, oh man. I can't imagine a world where Brett Kern is not on this roster, but it has to happen at some point.
I know. Adam says Radens versus Brewer at left guard.
I don't think that's a competition.
It's Aaron Brewer's job.
I think it's Aaron Brewer's job. I think Radens is just depth at this point.
Name an NFL player that you think would actively tank their performance for a better landing spot. Mike Herndon says 2021 Allen Robinson.
I've had a lot of people speculate that. A lot of smart people in football
on the Rams.
Just looking at that and being like, yeah, he's sick of the bleep. He was not playing up to his standard last year.
In Chicago, talk about an upgrade.
Could you blame him?
No, not at all. What is this Twitter handle? Traylon Burke's conditioning coach says Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Fournette, or pretty much any Jaguars first-round pick.
Did Fournette do that? How did he come? Was he a free agent when he ended up on the Bucs? I don't remember this.
I can't remember how he ended up on the Bucs.
Jalen Ramsey definitely. I feel like I could accuse Jalen Ramsey of this at points in his Jags career.
Those are the polls.
All right, very good. That's the show. That's going to do it for us today. I'm going to be back on Blaine and Mickey in about 25 minutes. Lucas, there is a 104.5 The Zone high school game of the week tonight at 7 p.m. What details can you share?
Brentwood Academy is hosting CPA, the second ever matchup between these two. Vanderbilt commit London Humphreys on the CPA side of things, and Brentwood Academy, always loaded. They lost 50-49 at Eagles Landing in Georgia last week. They'll look to bounce back and get their first win of the season. By the way, Blaine and Mickey, Ball State head coach Mike New at 2:30, Blaine's old quarterback.
The Vols Week 1 opponent. So that will be must listen during Blaine and Mickey. 3HL after that. Have a fantastic weekend. If I don't see you at the game on Saturday, I'll talk to you Sunday night on Primetime Radio Show Monday at 10.